Very warm welcome and very good afternoon to all the HPC participants for this exciting course on Introduction to Parallel Computing, and particularly this module, an interesting module on GPU computing. If you recall what we have discussed in previous session, one of the main objective of uh, earlier session was on programming model. The programming model for GPUs is meant for interacting with GPU using certain kinds of APIs or certain kinds of function calls, using which we were able to create few number of threads, we were able to launch them, and we are able to execute a kernel function by so many threads and so many blocks. And we have seen one at least a couple of programs, especially on incrementing a array of given numbers, right? That is what where we have stopped our yesterday session. Now today we are going to work on the concept called global memory and memory coalescing. So there is one commonality about today's class and tomorrow, I mean the next session and further session. In all these subsequent three sessions, if you look at one of the commonality is today we are talking about memory coalescing, and next class is about thread divergence, and the further class is on shared memory. In all these three classes, what we are going to understand is, what we are going to discuss is, we write couple of programs using and without using memory coalescing, subsequently using thread divergence and without using thread divergence, using shared memory and without using shared memory, and so on, so that you are going to understand very concretely about what is the beauty of all these three concepts that we are going to discuss in all these days subsequent. Yeah, so let us start discussing about the objective of today's session. So today we are mainly going to understand how do we effectively use global memory. This is what our primary focus is. In order to understand that, we also talk about how do we measure running time of a kernel. In a C program, you must have seen how much time a function call is going to take, or how much time a sequence of instructions are going to take. Similarly, today we are going to discuss about when you launch a kernel and when you execute a kernel, what is the running time, how many milliseconds are going to be required to execute one particular kernel, and we are going to understand some kind of syntaxes and so on. And further, one of the most important topic in today's class is about memory coalescing. Memory coalescing concept is very similar to data locality, what you must have seen in CPUs. We are going to revisit data locality very quickly and understand what do you mean by memory coalescing, and further we start writing few CUDA programs with and without memory coalescing. In all these in all these concepts, one of the main fundamental concept that we are going to understand today is more about memory access patterns. This is what one of the main point that we are going to understand by the end of today's class. So this point I am going to just reiterate from previous class. If at all you want to launch a lot of threads, right? This is a very common question people have asked, where we want to process n number of elements. We want to process n number of elements, and of course, n is known in the runtime, and hence we also would like to launch n number of threads, right? And typically, without worrying much, within each block, let us create as many threads as possible, as maximum as possible. So which means 1024 threads we can launch within one thread, and then how many number of threads we can launch? Ceil of n by 1024. You can use this function, or you can explicitly write this expression. Typically, typically I expect, even in terms of when people write some of the research oriented programs, still this kind of configuration should more or less work unless we are working on shared memory concepts. So there is one more catch. Typically we can say we can work with this value n by 1024, but if your number of blocks are very heavy, then you have to pay attention to these numbers, right? Number of blocks maximum number of blocks that you can launch in X direction will be 2 power 32, around 2 power 32, maybe 2 power 32 minus 1. And similarly, on Y direction and Z direction, you cannot launch more than 2 power 16. This is a hardware limitation based on your GPU device. I also will show you how to figure out these numbers using a device query program at the end of today's session. Yeah, now let us come back and try to understand one of the main motivation on today's class. Let us think of two programs. When you look at these two programs, in your first program, we have 10 increment operations. Whereas in the second program, we have 20 increment operations. Now, what is the natural question that we ask? Which program is running faster? Right? This is very natural, right? You all, I mean, I hope all of you are following, and you must be thinking of program one, which has few number of increment operations, and naturally, many of you feel that program one is going to run faster than program two. This is typical understanding, and of course, this is true many times, but we cannot say always. It also depends on not only the computation, it also matters about memory accesses. That's what we are going to discuss now. So if you look at program one has 6 memory operations, 6 memory accesses, whereas program two will be having fewer number of memory accesses when compared to program one. So though program two has more number of computations, but still has lesser number of memory accesses, at least I mean, there is a possibility that program two can run faster than program one. This is what we are going to understand in today's session. Why does this happen and so on? We are going to discuss all of them. So let us look at revisit this concept. Possibly you must have heard from the first module. I'm going to recall this concept on data locality. What do you mean by this data locality? Whenever CPU wants to access some memory location in your C program, say something like A of 10 I would like to access, right? You know that there is a cache memory, there is a RAM, right? Primary memory. Whenever a CPU wants to access some element, say A of 5, A of 5 will be verified first whether A of 5 is available in your cache or not. If it is available in cache, it is going to be cache hit. If it is not available, it is going to call cache miss, and you are going to fetch how much you are going to fetch now from main memory. You are not going to access A of 10 or A of 7, the particular element whatever your program would like to access. We are not going to access that one single element. We are going to access one block, one chunk of memory locations we are going to retrieve from main memory to cache. So that is what we are going to discuss here, where you think of 0 to 5, these 6 elements are part of one block. This block is, I'm calling as a chunk. This block is so different from the thread block. These are only consisting of elements, right? We have first block, we have second block, we have third block, and so on. Whenever if you want to access A of 7, A of 7 is available here, right? A of 7 is available here. Rather than accessing this particular element, we are going to access all these elements together as a chunk or as a block from RAM to cache, right? That's what I'm calling. So when we are accessing this, we are going to transfer the entire block. Why do we do that? All that this is part of to reduce the number of memory transactions from RAM to cache. That was one of the main philosophy in the goal is to reduce the number of memory transactions in CPU. Now let us think of what happens in GPU. In GPU, this is one of the most important term called WAPs. We are going to discuss about these WAPs on today's class and in next session as well, very crucially. What do you mean by a WAP? Let us think of in when we launch or when we create a block of threads, something like 1024, or even much lesser or more, or in general, whatever the number of threads you create, among all those threads, they are going to partition 32 threads in sequence. The first 0th one, first one, second one, and so on till 31. All these chunk of threads we are calling as one warp. The next subsequent threads, 32 threads, we are calling as second warp. This is the 0th warp, this is first warp, this is second warp, and so on. Finally, the last warp need not contain 32 threads. Whatever is remaining will be having those number of threads in the last warp. So, I mean, why are we discussing about this warp? Whenever some computation we are going to perform, all these 32 threads, either computation or memory accesses. In today's class, we are going to pay more attention about memory accesses, whereas in next class, we are going to focus more on computation. So whenever we talk about these 32 threads, these 32 threads are going to together read memory locations and not one after the other or not independently. So there is a T0, T1, T2, and so on, T31. All of them figure out where do I want to read from RAM, from global memory in GPU, right? So some thread is going to access from somewhere, and the other thread want to access from somewhere else. Now they are going to understand each other and say that all of them, all these memory locations are somewhere. Can we access all of them together? That's what is more about warps doing either computation or memory accesses together. Let us understand a little more details. So we all know, and we are going to recall that the size of an integer is 4 bytes, and each warp consisting of 32 threads. That's also we know. And memory transaction, usually, at least the one what I am talking about in the current context, from your global memory to cache, right? From global memory to cache, the amount of memory locations, the number of memory locations that we are transferring at a time is called one memory transaction, and the width of one memory transaction or a block whose size is 128 bytes. So 128 bytes, you can think of 32 integers. So and we also as a concept of warp consisting of 32 threads, all these 32 threads wanted to access the corresponding 32 elements from global memory. So rather than accessing each of them separately, all of them going to access together. Let us understand this is an example of a global memory. So there is a 0th byte, there is a first byte, second byte, and so on, 127th byte, right? So 0 to 127, the first 128 bytes we are calling as 0th block, first block, and second block. Now what is the task that we are discussing? Each thread simply would like to read one integer. Each thread would like to read one integer. Now let us see what happens. If you look at somewhere, these are the 32 threads that, I mean, of course, the programmer is going to create these threads, and program is going to inform the program that the responsibility of these so and so threads is read memory locations from so and so locations. Now if I tell if I write a program something like this is T0, this is T1, and so on, T31, all these 32 threads are going to read all the consecutive memory locations, right? These are consecutive, threads are consecutive, and the corresponding memory elements, the data elements, are also consecutive. Then it is interesting for us, rather than fetching each element one at a time, all these 32 elements together we are calling as one single chunk, and this single chunk we are reading at a time, and hence we say that the number of memory transactions is equal to 1. And also you notice that this concept, consecutive threads access consecutive memory locations, right? When if at all we are falling in this scenario where consecutive threads are accessing consecutive memory locations, then rather than transferring too many memory transactions, we can combine all the memory accesses, right? This thread would like to read this thread would like to read this thread would like to read this, and so on. Rather than reading all of them independently, we are going to combine all those memory locations into one chunk and read the whole chunk from global memory to the cache. And this concept, the process of combining all of them together, is called memory coalescing. And memory coalescing property is very good if it satisfies this property. We are going to look at a lot of examples on this and trying to understand whether memory coalescing is good or bad, or how much degree of memory coalescing, and so on. Yeah, so here we were discussing about this, the concept of memory coalescing. And in this concept, we are going to understand different kinds of memory accesses. This is one access where the type is sequential and as well as aligned. What does it mean aligned? If all threads are going to access from a single block, this is one block, this is another block, this is another block, I'm calling as these are different chunks. If all the threads are going to be accessing from a single chunk, right, in a single chunk, then we say such kind of access is called aligned access. And also all these threads are going to read consecutively, so we are calling as a sequential. This kind of example, the example what I'm showing is of type sequential, both sequential and aligned. Now let us look at another example where here say T1 thread is not accessing the first element. T1 thread is going to access second element, and the T2 thread is going to access first element. So there is a mismatch, but still the memory coalescing is good in this example, because the total number of memory transactions that you are required for this example is going to be 1, because it is satisfying the other property, that alignment, and also the consecutive threads are not accessing the consecutive memory locations exactly. If you look at lower level detail, it is not matching, but overall together T0 to T1, these are consecutive threads. From this element to this element and so on, these are all the elements that are going to be accessing together, right? So it satisfies that property called the consecutive threads, consecutive memory locations, and still here the memory coalescing is very good, though it is aligned but not sequential. Here is another example where the threads are going to be accessing in sequential but not aligned. So this kind of example is called unaligned one, where you notice that one thread is reading from a different block, right? This thread is reading from a different block, and all the rest of the threads are reading from a different block. So which means the threads are not aligned to the blocks properly. So only we are calling as, since threads and blocks are not aligned properly, we say that this kind of memory accesses are unaligned. Now possibly you can understand here how many number of memory transactions are required in this example. Possibly you should able to understand, right? So this is going to be one block, one memory transaction, and all the rest of them will be another transaction, and hence in this example we are going to require 2 memory transactions. Yeah, so again we are going to discuss a few more examples, and you will be able to write this program. I will give you sufficient code so that you should be able to run this. Now in this today's session, one of the main important concept is the concept of this memory coalescing with and without using different kinds of examples. So now let us look at this kernel, right? This is a kernel. So this is a GPU function which is being called by so many threads. Now what is the function definition? The function definition is just go to the particular thread ID and increment the value of maybe 10th thread is going to access 10th location and increment. 11th thread is going to access 11th element and increment by 1. This is what we are doing simply. So now what happens here? How many number of memory transactions for reading operation, and how many number of memory transactions are there for writing operation? That's what we are going to discuss in this example. So here all these 32 threads, right? We are discussing about only one warp. Similarly, the same thing is going to happening for all the warps, right? We are discussing about what happens to T0 to T31. Similarly, same thing will happen for, or similar thing will happen for other threads. So T0, right, as per this code is concerned, T0 is going to access 0th location and so on. T31 thread is going to access 31th location. And in this example, the number of reads, the memory transactions, right? The entire block will be fetched once, do the necessary increment operations, and now we have to write back to the global memory, right? The entire memory chunk will be written to the global memory only once. So for this example, the number of read transactions will be 1, and the number of write transactions is also 1. Let us look at a few more examples. This is one of the main theme of today's session: offset access. Offset access. What do you mean by this offset access? You look at this program, right? In the kernel definition, rather than accessing directly a of 10th element, we are doing something called plus s. This s value is offset value, right? The user is going to, from the main program, we are going to pass the value of s is say 1. As of now, we are going to fix this s value as 1 and trying to understand what is happening for this example. When the value of s is equal to 1, what is happening? This is going to be T0, and this is going to be T0, and this is going to be T31. When this happens, how many number of memory chunks we are reading and how many number of memory chunks we are writing with respect to this single warp is concerned? I'm talking about with this single warp. T0 to T31 is a warp. Because of this s is equal to 1. S is equal to 1. What happens? T0 is not going to read from here. T0 is going to read, this s value is 1, right? This 0 is 1. TID value is 0 and s value is 1. So what does it mean? T0 is going to access a of 1th location, and T31 this thread is going to access a of 32. So which means now what can you observe? This is sequential but not aligned, and hence we are going to read two blocks, right? This block and as well as this block. Though there is a single element here, but we know that we have to the way the GPU or even CPU, the way we are reading memory is not that single location, the entire block. So what from this concept, what do you understand? The number of reads are going to be this block and this block, so number of reads are going to be 2, and similarly after we perform increment operation is over, again it has to be written back. So the number of written operations, the number of memory chunks that are going to be written to global memory is also going to be 2. Now let us look at what happens when the s value is 31. Earlier we have seen the s value in the offset access, s value was 0 at some time, s value was 1 at some time. Now we are discussing at what happens when s value is 31, right? S value is 31. Then what happens? In this example earlier we have these 3 blocks, right? Rather than drawing all these 3 blocks, now we have a lot of multiple blocks. Block 1 consisting of A0 to A31 elements. Block 2 consisting of the next 32 elements from A32 to A63. The next block consisting of the rest of the 32 elements, and so on. Let us think of 32 blocks are available. So which means we have all 1024 elements are there, or 1023 possibly, right? 1023 elements are available, and so on. Now let us understand what happens when we are reading these threads, right? T0 to T31 are going to read A31 to 62. Why is this? you can understand this, where the value of S is 31 and the value of S is 31 here. When the value of thread ID is 0, right? When the value of thread ID is 0, thread ID is 0 is going to access A of 31. Thread ID 0 is going to access A of 31, and so on. Thread 31 is going to access A of 62 because of the same operations, right? We just substitute PID value as 31 plus 61, so which means we will get 62. From here, what do you understand? You can again understand the same with respect to similar example what we have seen earlier. T0 is going to access from block B1. You notice this A31 is available in block B1, and all the rest of the elements are available in block B2. So in this example, since the offset value is 31, how many number of memory transactions are required? 2. Read 2 and again write 2. Now let us understand little slightly different concept. S is equal to 32. Now what happens? Earlier the blocks were not aligned. At some point of time earlier, I mean in the very beginning, blocks and threads, the elements in the block and the threads were not aligned. In the very beginning they were aligned. I mean from the next iteration onwards, they were not aligned. And again when S is equal to 32, now you notice that all these T0 to T31 are going to access A32 to 63. Why is this? Again, you can understand when S value is 32, right? Let us see this. This is 32 and this is 32. And what is the value of TID? TID is, let us think of 0. If TID is 0, right? T0 is going to access A of TID plus S, which means A of 32. Similarly, A of 31 is going to access A of 31 plus 32, which means A of 63, right? So in this example, what you can understand is all these 32 threads are going to access 32 elements from second block alone without referring to any other block, right? We are going to lot more we are spending a lot of time on this because this is such an important concept where we need to understand where the threads are being accessed, right? In which memory locations we are accessing. So in this example, again, the number of reads and number of writes are 1 because we are going to access only this block alone. Yeah, so far we have understand about offset access. Now we are going to understand about the strided access. In strided access, here rather than looking at plus S, we are going to understand about multiplied by S. What happens? We are discussing about when in your program, in your kernel function definition, when we slightly change in the code, what is the impact on the memory accesses? This is much more wonderful than what we have seen in offset access. Let us go and discuss the value of S is 1, 2, and so on. What happens? Let us see if S value is equal to 1, it is as it is. If S value is 2, let us think of this. When S value is 2, what are we doing? This, I mean, we are talking about 0 to 31, but 0 multiplied by 2, that is 0. 1 multiplied by 2, that is 2, right? This is accessing this. T1 is accessing, right? T1, right? This one index you multiply by 2, that is what we are accessing, A2. And now let us go through 31. This 31, again, the 31 we multiplied by 2, that is going to access A62. Right? What is the careful observation here? When the S value is 2, all these 32 threads are going to access A0 to A62, and some of these elements are available in B0 and some of these elements are available in B2. Now, which means when the value of S is 2, we are going to access these two blocks. Now let us increase the value of S. What happens? Let us look at this. Right here we are increasing the value of S. The value of S is increased to 4. When the value of S is 4, what is going to happening now? Again the same threads. You multiply this 0 with 4. You multiply 1 with 4. You multiply 31 with 4. Right? This 0 is accessing A0 thread. T1 multiplied by 4, which is nothing but 4. So T1 is accessing A of 4th location. And similarly, T31 is accessing A124, which is nothing but 31 multiplied by 4. And T31 is accessing 124. Now what can you observe? 124, some of these elements are available in block B4. Right? This 124 element is available, A124 element, right? This A124 element is available in block B4. So which means for this single warp wanted to read just 32 elements, and these 32 elements are not available in a single block. They are scattered across multiple blocks B1, B2, B3, B4, and hence number of read operations, the number of reading memory transactions is 4, and again writing is also 4. Now possibly you can understand what happens when the value of S is equal to 8. Same thing I'm not going to discuss in detail, or S is equal to 8, S is equal to 16, and so on. Finally, when S is equal to 32, this is the worst case that you can think of. You can take pen and paper possibly little later or now and try to understand this case much more detail. Thread 0 is going to access only one element from this block. All the rest of the elements have been accessed but are not going to be useful for this program. This program is not meant for any specific purpose. This program is some dummy program through which we are going to understand what is happening to the memory accesses. The thread T0 is going to access one element from B1. T1 is going to access only one element, say 32. This is 32 from the second block. And T31 is going to access again only one single element from the last block. So what is the lesson here? Though we want to just read 32 elements, but since these 32 elements are not available consecutively, these 32 elements are scattered here, there, and so on across so many blocks, and we have to read so many 32 memory transactions need to be happening, and hence the memory coalescing is very, very worse in this example. Now, what is the short summary? So far we have understood about essentially two kinds of accesses. One is about what happens when we do plus S. Other one is what happens when we do multiplied by S. In both of them, we have seen that the memory transactions are going to be really varying based on the value of S. I'll take a couple of questions and then we'll continue with the class after discussing with the questions. If there are any questions, we'll take for some time and go back to the rest of the concepts. Yeah, Shirayu, are you there?
Yes, sir. Am I audible now? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, so first question is memory coalescing similar to the concept of shared memory?
Shared memory, it is a little different. As of now, the memory coalescing, we are only understanding about whether the consecutive threads are going to be accessing consecutive memory locations or not. If that is going to be happening, then the number of memory transactions are going to be reduced. That's what the main theme. Shared memory is a little different concept. We go and discuss a little later in further classes.
Okay, sir. So there was a follow-up question to the same one, that is aligned and sequential case. Is it similar to telling that aligned is memory coalescing and sequential is shared memory?
No. There is no relation about aligned and sequential with respect to shared memory. Shared memory concept is completely different concept. As of now, let us not bring that. As of now, we are only discussing about memory transactions between global memory to cache. Even if there is no cache, still to the registers, we are actually having or reading or writing from global memory, right? Whether the reads and the writes are happening together within one block or happening in multiple places, and that's the main theme. That's what we are discussing.
Okay, sir, I'll tell the next question. It is referring to I'll read the question. In first case of m by m access, s is equal to 32. In what will happen of the data in another block?
Sorry, Chirai, I lost your voice.
So I read the question as it is. Are you able to understand? I'll just read it again.
Yeah. Please read one more time.
Hello.
Yeah. Please read one more time.
Yeah. In first case of m by m access.
Okay.
In first case of m by m access, s is equal to 32. In what will happen to the data in another block? That is the question.
See, I mean, we have discussed all these examples. Maybe one more time I'll just give you this example. If you look at this offset axis, we have two blocks. I mean, of course, we have many blocks, right? We the number of elements and number of threads. Number of threads we are thinking of n. Number of elements are just a lot of one big array is there. Let us assume not even n elements. The number of threads are n. Number of elements in the array or need not be n. It could be much more than n. Right? Then what are we doing if all these threads are going to whether all these threads are going to read from the same block or multiple block, right? What we are essentially trying to understand is all these threads wanted to read some data from this block, and also this thread wanted to read from this block. Rather than accessing single elements, we say that all these accesses together we call as a single chunk of memory and read together. Here also we are reading together. What happens to other elements? Other elements we are not discussing with respect to this WOP is concerned. We have another WOP, right? We have another WOP. Another WOP is going to do very similar calculations, right? There is this we are calling as say T0 to T31. What happens T32? T32 is going to access this. T33 is going to access this. T34 is going to access this. Absolutely, same thing is going to be happening further. The other elements also will be incremented based on this code. Yeah.
Right, sir. In this case, when s, another question is, in this case when s is equal to 4, it need not be the case that always T0 will access first and T1 will access next. The accesses could be in random fashion. So T0 could access first, then some T32 would access. So
right.
Will that not cause more number of reads?
Right. So a very good question. Yeah. So all these reads are not happening too much independently. In the very beginning, as I said, what do you mean by this WOP? The WOP 32 threads are going to first understand internally when all these threads are being executed. I mean, there should be someone who should understand where I should read. All the threads are not going to independently read. This thread scheduling execution model is sitting and trying to understand all these threads are from a single WOP right? Which means all these 32 threads are from single WOP. So which means I am not going to allow all of you to read independently. You tell me where do you want? You tell me where do you want? You want to read from here, you want to read from there, you want to read from some other place, and so on. All these places I will handle together, and I'm going to provide you the necessary number of memory transactions as a chunk of 128 bytes. Yeah, they're not going to read
Yes, sir.
independently.
Those are the.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Those are the questions.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. We'll proceed further. Yeah. So let us. I will share some of these codes, and still you should be able to write few more on top of them. Where so far we have discussed about two programs, very simple kernel function definitions. So this is stride access. Very similarly, we have seen offset access. These two programs, the kernel programs we have seen. Now, how do you write a main program to launch this kernel for various values of f, right? Which means we have to write a for loop and start calling the same kernel so many times. But what should be the how many number of elements should be there in your array, and how do you measure the running time? And we are going to print the running time in each of these cases. And in theory, we have understood so far. In theory, in principle, the number of memory transactions are increased when the stride value is increased, right? That's what we have seen, right? When s value was 32, when s value was 2, we are going to read only these two blocks. When s value is 4, we have read these 4 blocks. When s value is 32, we have read from all the blocks. So which means as you increase the value of stride value, the number of memory transactions are going to be increased. All this we have understood in theory. Now we are going to discuss how do we measure the actual running time in all these kernels in all these cases. That's what we are going to discuss now. This is one example where you can understand certain syntaxes very carefully. So there is this CUDA event, right? You can simply think of as a data type, or it is a structured data type where we are declaring some start and stop, and we are going to create these two events. These two events we have declared. One is start event, other one is stop event. These are the two events. These two events we have created using some syntaxes. Of course, fine. Now, what is the kernel that we are interested in? This is the kernel. As of now, you think of this is one single kernel which is shown in 13th line. What is the purpose of this kernel? The purpose of this kernel is something, just we are launching some number of threads and incrementing all the elements by 1. Now, if you want to know what is the running time in milliseconds, this kernel is going to be requiring, right? This kernel is going to take some number of milliseconds. How do we calculate that? So we need to do this CUDA event record. We need to record the time before the kernel and after the kernel, right? You notice these two lines. This is the major function call. Before this function call and after this function call. Before the function call, we are recording in start event. After the kernel call, we are recording that event we are calling as stop event. In both of these events, we are capturing the time. And further, there is a event synchronization mechanism. For the time being, you can ignore this. And later, you look at this line, right? This line. In this line, we are just taking the difference between start time and end time. That we are calling as elapsed time. We are capturing what is the elapsed time, what is the time difference before the kernel launch and after the kernel launch. If we capture these two timings and take the difference, what do we get? We get the actual time taken by the kernel. And then finally, you are destroying all the events what you have created. And finally, we are printing the value of time which is stored in your float variable using %f. And here now let us discuss another point about the importance of this. The importance of this CUDA event synchronize. CUDA event synchronize. If we do not write this line, if we just erase this line, then whatever you try to understand what is the variable we are passing inside. The variable that we are passing inside this CUDA event synchronize is stop. If we do not synchronize, then whatever the time it is being recorded here, before that function call is complete, before that function definition is even executed, the thread can come, the CPU thread can come to the next line and start understanding what is the difference between start and stop. We should not do that, right? You will be able to understand this concept once we finished. There is another concept called async and sync. After that concept, you will be you should be able to understand this thoroughly. We'll come back. So far, one of the main thing what we have understood in this slide is how to capture the time before the kernel launch and after the kernel launch and take the difference, so that you you are going to measure the actual running time of a particular kernel. Yeah, this is yeah, please look at this slide. Try to spend some time, just couple of seconds. I'll discuss about in detail. Just spend at least few seconds on this slide. The value of S we are discussing from 0 to 32. The value of S we are discussing from 0 to 32. And when S value is 0, the number of threads are always n, and they are going to be accessing from 0 to n minus 1. From this example also you can understand, there is an example given here. T0 to Tn minus 1, all these threads are accessing locations. You look at this red color pattern. The red color pattern, these threads are going to accessing 0 to n minus 1. This is one possibility. This is one possibility when the S value is 0. When S value is 1, what happens? The same T0 to Tn minus 1 threads are accessing from this location to this location, right? From A of 1 to A of n. So which means you need more number of elements, right? You do not require simply n elements are not sufficient. You need one more element here. Now let us understand what happens when the value of S is 32. When the value of S is 32, you look at that the T0 to T0 to Tn minus 1, all these threads are going to access memory locations coming from T32 to Tn minus 1 plus 32. This is n minus 1th thread. N minus 1th thread is going to access n minus 1th element plus 32, because this S value is 32. Right now, what I'm essentially trying to explain in this slide is, when you are increasing the value of offset, right, you need to have some number of memory locations that are available in your array, so that then only you should be able to access, this thread can access some memory location. So one of the key points from this slide is the number of elements should be something like n plus 31, or even in the worst case you can have n plus 32. When you are running this program, for various values of S could be 0, S could be 1, and so on, S could be 32. In all these cases, right, there should be, whenever you launch these threads need to have the corresponding memory location should be available in your global memory. So which means the number of elements that you need to have should be n plus 32 for this example. Let us understand the main program. So which means in your main program, this is self-sufficient. In the main program, the offset access kernel call we are calling for different values of I. where I is varying from 0 to 32. In each time, we are calling the same kernel function for a different value of I, and inside this I value is nothing but inside S. So we are increasing the offset every time, and all the rest of the functionality for capturing the running time before the kernel launch, after the kernel launch, and some synchronization, and taking the elapsed time and printing the time in milliseconds for all of them. If you print, now what happens if you print in all those cases? Of course, the block size and number of blocks, you can think of n by blocks and so on. This is usual. Now when you run this program for all these 32 values, what happens? You can run and see there should be a graph. And I mean, when you look at the running times, this running time, right? This running time, if you look at, more or less in all the cases, we are either reading one memory transaction or two memory transactions. So usually the running time should be more or less same in all these cases. Now let us look at what happens in the stride axis. Earlier we have looked at offset axis. Now when you are looking at stride axis, very similar to this example, if you understand this example very carefully and apply your own thought and try to understand, for the stride axis you will be requiring 32 times n elements, because each thread is going to access from a different block, right? Each block will be having at least again 32 elements, and the total number of elements you will need will be 32 times n. You fix this, so which means you have to allocate memory for these many number of elements. Now you start running this program. This program is very similar to the one what we have seen earlier, and in this case again you print the time for all values of 0 to 32. Here in theory we have observed that the number of transactions are going to be increased, right? And similarly, now when you run this code, you should be able to see that the time it requires for each stride axis should be definitely increasing in all the cases as you are increasing the value of I. So this is a simple understanding about what is the intuition, why this running time is increased either in theory or in practice, because the number of bytes what we have requested is so different from number of bytes that have been transferred, and this expression we are calling as degree of coalescing. If the number of bytes what we requested and the number of bytes what has been transferred is exactly same, right? If that is the case, then degree of coalescing will be equal to 1, and for the degree of coalescing, if you multiply it with 100, that we call as bus utilization. If we want to read, say, 32 threads from a single warp wanted to read 32 elements, and all the 32 elements have been read, then it is very good. So then bus has been utilized very properly. Whereas we want to read one block of 32 elements. From that block we want to access only one element is useful, but all the rest of the elements just have been read without having any use. So in such case, degree of coalescing will be 1 by 32, and bus utilization will be 1 by 32 multiplied by 100, which is roughly 3%. So this is what the worst case when you apply the value of S is equal to 32 in stride case. Now this is slightly different concept called array of structures, or other concept we are going to understand the structure of arrays. We are going to understand what is the difference between array of structures and structure of arrays. In both of these examples, again, what is the key role with respect to memory coalescing? That is what we are going to understand. You look at this structure. In this structure we have a lot of these elements, red, green, blue, hue, saturation. Some variables have been declared under one structure. This is one structure. Now what happens, what are we doing here? array of structures, right? Lot of such structures we have declared. Then what is the memory layout? How all these elements are arranged, have been arranged in global memory. This is red, this is green, and so on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All these 5 variables are arranged consecutively for one structure. Then further, the next 5 elements, right? All these 5 elements, 5 elements, 5 elements, and so on have been arranged one after the other. Now let us think of a program, something like where we want to read only R, right? We want to read only R value, but all threads, this is one single instruction in your program, and this instruction is being executed by all the threads, right? as I mentioned in the very beginning in this class, the main intention is we need to understand the pattern of memory accesses. Thread 0 is going to read from here. Thread 1 is going to read from here. Thread 0 and thread 1, all of them wanted to read the same variable. Of course, the same variable from a different structure. This is from this you think of S of 0. This you think of S of 1. This you think of S of 2. Thread 0 wanted to read S of 0 dot R, which means this location. Thread 1 again wanted to read one single variable from S of 1, and that variable is sitting here, right? This completes here, this starts from here. This again completes here, and again the next one starts here. So what is happening here? There are a lot of threads, though all the threads wanted to read only one element, but what is happening to the memory accesses or the memory locations consecutive or scattered here and there? They are not consecutive. One is here, other one is here, other one is here, right? So which means the memory coalescing is very poor in this example. This is about array of structures. Array of structures is very good in CPUs, but when you talk about GPUs, since all these threads are going to access appropriate memory locations which are scattered, we are saying this kind of pattern is not good for GPUs. Now what is good? This is what good, where all are independent arrays, right? R1, R0, R1, R2, and so on. This is R0, this is R1, R2, and so on. There are a lot of these red variables are consecutive. Again, there are all these blue locations are consecutive, and so on. Now what happens to this code? Earlier, what do you want? S of 0 dot R, S of 1 dot R. Rather than that way, now what do we want to read? R of 0, R of 1, R of 2, and so on, right? And thread 0 is going to read from R of 0. Thread 1 is going to read from R of 1. Thread 2 is going to read from R of 2, and so on. So what does this mean? All the consecutive threads are reading from consecutive memory locations. So which means your memory coalescing is much better in this example. So when you are writing about these CUDA programs, you have to be very careful about are we doing any offset accesses or stride accesses or structure of arrays or array of structures. We have to be careful. If at all you are doing if at all you are using array of structures, then change such code from array of structures to structure of arrays or independent arrays. All these arrays are independent. Still, all these memory locations are consecutive, and all these memory locations are consecutive, and so on. So which means we are playing a very significant role when multiple threads are reading. We are paying attention and being very careful. So this is again a kind of practice question. We will post all these this question in the questions also. where I'm not going to tell answer. You need to understand and work out as an example where in all these cases, in first case, second case, third case, in all these cases, which statements are which statements have this memory coalesced pattern is good or bad. So essentially we are asking which statements have good access pattern, right? You should be able to work out independently at your leisure time. We will post you all this in detail in the blog. Yeah, let us come and discuss this async unsync. This concept is very interesting, and this is the first time we are discussing in this course. In this GPU computing module, let us think of this is a very simple program. Please look at this simple program. Try to understand what this program's intention is. There is a printf statement. We are going to print this hello world. Definitely we are going to print this. Now let us call this function print1. How many number of threads? 2 threads and 1 block. After this function definition is over, right? After this statements are printing, what are we printing? The thread index and block index. After this function definition is over, we'll come here and return 0. So when you execute this, what is the expected output? How many printf statements are executed? There are 2 threads. 2 threads here launching. This printf statement, definitely you will see this output. I would encourage all of you to run this program. Most probably, many times you do not see the output from this printf statement. This printf statement will not be executed. Of course, it is executed, but you will not be able to see the output. What is the reason? The reason to understand here is there are 2 types of functions. Functions will be executed asynchronously or synchronously. Usually in your C program, whatever the functions you have seen, all kinds of functions are of type synchronous functions. What does that mean? There is a function 1. There is a function 2. There is a function 3. After this function definition is executed completely, then you go to function 2. After this function definition is completely over, then you go to function 3. If such kind of execution is happening, then we say that all these functions are executed in a synchronous fashion. Whereas you look at this print, where this print statement is, where this print kernel is executing, this kernel is getting executed in GPU, but not in CPU. CPU is a different device. GPU is a different device. When this function print1, whenever we call this function, now CPU is saying, oh, print1 functionality is yours. You start executing this, and I am going to execute the rest of the statements. This is the most important point. CPU started executing this and handed over this work to the GPU and started executing the rest of the statements. CPU is not waiting to complete this function definition. CPU is not going to wait till this function definition is over. So which means we have just started the function definition. This is being executed and CPU thread has come to return 0 and the main function is over. So which means my CPU thread is terminated before GPU threads are finished its own job. So only you do not get any output. I mean, this output you do not get. This output you will get. So in order to make this synchronous, explicitly the programmer has to write this function called CUDA device synchronize. When we write this function CUDA device synchronize function, what happens to the CPU thread? CPU thread is not waiting for this earlier, but when CPU thread is going to read this function, then CPU thread is going to understand that, oh, some function is being executed in the GPU, please wait till this is saying the right device synchronize function is going to explicitly tell that there are some functions that are being executed in device. Till all those functions are executed, CPU thread should just simply wait there. It should wait till the completion of all GPU threads, and then by the time this printf statement, all the printf statements will be executed. Now CPU thread is going to execute the rest of the statements further. This is more about CUDA device synchronize. At this point, now you can understand about what CUDA event is synchronize. Earlier we have seen CUDA event synchronize function. This CUDA event synchronize function we have written when you are measuring the running time. When you are measuring the running time, there also when you are measuring the running time, we have passed a variable called the stop record event. CUDA device synchronization is a powerful synchronization mechanism which is going to tell us wait till what time? Till all kernel functions are finished. Where CUDA event synchronize is going to tell that you don't have to wait till all kernel functions are finished, but you just wait till the stop event record is over, right? Where internally we are passing the stop, right? When you pass the stop internally, this function is going to only tell that you wait till the corresponding stop event is over. Till that event is recorded, the CPU thread is not going to execute further instructions. So please stop there. So instead of this, you can even use this, but in some sense you are hitting with very large hammer for the smaller problem. So if at all when you are measuring the running time, this function will be suffice, but still if you want to use the big hammer, you can use this function as well. This is a very superior functionality. Yeah, almost we are coming to the closing of this presentation. We have a few more topics about device query. This device query is a program. This device query program is available under utilities. I mean, when you install in your machines, or even when you are using Google Colab, you can apply this CD, go to user directory and go to local directory, go to CUDA, go to samples. When you run this command CD, you internally go to this folder or that particular device query directory, and you can even type ls and then make will be useful to compile the program called the device query program. This program is already built in, available in Google Colab. And finally we are executing this program. When you execute this device query program, this is the output. This device query program will be useful to understand what are the specifications, what are the characteristics of all kinds of hardware components available in your GPU. This program I have run on Google Colab and I am able to get this output. More or less, I would expect you also will be getting very similar outputs. There are a lot of parameters I am putting. I'm showing you only important parameters in this slide. What is the size of global memory? This is the size of global memory. This is roughly something like 15 GB, right? 15 GB is 15 GB global memory is available in the CUDA device, in the GPU device. And what is the number of multiprocessors? We have 40 number of multiprocessors are there, and within each multiprocessor we have 64 CUDA cores are there, and hence the total number of CUDA cores are this much. It doesn't mean that the number of threads what you launch is only so and so, right? We can launch many more number of threads than the number of cores available. So only we should be able to hide certain memory latencies. So some thread is wanted to read something and that memory location is not available in GPU. So which means it has to go to the global memory and fetch that data. Meanwhile, if there are other threads which can do the computation, so only it is always encouraged to launch more number of threads than what is available, than the number of CUDA codes. Again, I mean, we have this grid size thread block. right? You can notice some of these parameters. 1024 is the maximum number of threads that you can launch in X direction and Y direction due to certain hardware limitations. In Z direction, we can launch only 64. That's what the hardware limitation. And again, if you look at grid size, as I have earlier mentioned, 2 power 32 minus 1, this value. This is 2 power 16 minus 1, and this is 2 power 16 minus 1. Yeah, so these are few references where this course is available in YouTube by Professor Soumyajit Dev. He's from IIT Kharagpur, and there is another material available by Prof. John and Prof. Dev from Lübeck University. This is also available in YouTube. There are a lot of these lectures available, and there are certain reference material. Again, few more books we are already posting in the forum. In the question and answers document, we are posting all these references. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to take a few more questions before we close the session. Yeah, few more questions.